In this engaging conversation, Ryan and I explore the vibrant culture of Berkeley, the energy of the town, and the importance of community in artistic expression. We explore the duality of emotions, the role of music in navigating complex feelings, and the importance of humility and vulnerability in both education and the arts. Ryan shares keen insight on the impact of family on his creativity, the pride he takes in his work as an educator and a musician. This is my fourth interview with Ryan, and with each one, I become a more devoted fan of his music. But most importantly, I appreciate the ability that he has to look inward and evolve into even a more super intelligent, thoughtful, and well-rounded person. Enjoy the podcast.
She sat in her grass.
Hello, everyone. This is W, host of the High Art on the Edge page, host of two podcast features. The first one, PCE, which stands for Post-Concert Energy, and the one you're listening to now, Surprise Cast. I am so excited to bring in this guest to the Surprise Cast studio because this is my fourth conversation with him. Who is this mystery guest? Let's find out. Welcome, my friend. Could you tell us your full name and where you are podcasting from?
My name is Ryan Lescure, and I'm podcasting from Berkeley, California.
As in Berkeley Bears, yeah?
As in Berkeley Bears, indeed.
So before we launch into this great discussion about your music and your role as a musician and artist and all that good stuff, I need to tell you this, Ryan. I love Berkeley. I love the entire environment. I love the campus. I love the stores, Amoeba Records.
Mhm.
You recently moved there, yeah?
I did, yes.
So tell the listeners and me, what is it that you enjoy about Berkeley?
My goodness. Well, Berkeley for me has always occupied this almost mystical position in my mind. And when I was a teenager growing up further out into the East Bay, in the East Bay suburbs, I would often come out to Berkeley. I'd come out to Telegraph, and I would sort of daydream like I was some kind of member of the Beat Generation myself or some sort of 60s hippie, right? I'd walk up and down Telegraph, ducking into shops, checking out Amoeba, of course, and just spending time on Cal's campus. And Berkeley's energy is so unique. I love the Bay Area. And at this point, I was reflecting the other day that I've lived now in San Francisco, Oakland, and Berkeley. And the thing that I'm really loving about Berkeley already is it's deliciously walkable. One, it feels more community oriented. And the other two cities I've lived in the Bay Area, they do as well in their own way. But Berkeley, it's more direct, I find. And there's just more greenery.
Yes.
And I love being surrounded by greenery. I need it.
How do you feel about the college life, being part of that experience, even though you're beyond college years? Not too far.
Not too far, but surprisingly far and getting further. Listeners can't see the hairline is receding a little bit. Well, I love being around the energy of a college town. It's palpable. There's nothing quite like it. And even if it's a place where I've never been before, a college town, there's kind of a consistent energy, I find. So I've spent some time, of course, being an academic myself. I've presented at conferences and I've checked out programs across the country. And I remember going to Madison, Wisconsin for the first time, and then Champaign and Urbana in Illinois, and hearing these places described as college towns in the Midwest, and hearing them described actually as being similar to Berkeley in some ways. And I think it's cool because you can transport yourself into a college town and you get a certain feeling. I think you feel the liveliness, you feel the energy. And there always seems to be something a little special going on with music in college towns too. You have young people playing house parties, you have people often, I think, doing things outside of more official channels when it comes to making art. And to me, there's often a vibrancy that comes along with that.
For all the listeners out there, when you visit Berkeley, may I suggest you take a walk around the campus. You are stepping inside of history in terms of the architecture, in terms of former amazing scholars. And there is a tremendous energy, a buzz about that campus. Would you agree?
I would absolutely agree.
What I really embrace when I visit Berkeley 3 times a year, after you're done walking the campus, as you alluded to earlier, head down Telegraph Avenue. There's something for everyone. In fact, there is a jewelry store there that my girlfriend and I go to once a year, and I buy her a ring. She buys me a ring. And we're getting to know the gentleman that runs that store. And I think what I'm trying to get to, there is a real warm communal feel.
There is.
And that's important for you, right?
It is important for me. And with that said, I'm also not someone who laments that if I perceive there to be an absence. If I perceive there to be an absence, I will try to create it myself and I will try to join up with others who are like-minded. But I am drawn to that
Yes.
that communal way of thinking about things. I'm drawn to any sort of collectivistic group dynamic where people are helping each other and looking out for each other and not letting competition get in the way of humanity.
I wonder if I bumped into you sometime, I mean, other than a year ago, but I imagine I probably was walking on Telegraph Avenue whilst you were there too. I was probably listening to My Bloody Valentine or Ride or Kitchens of Distinction.
Mm-hmm.
So there is a real affinity and attraction for me in Berkeley. And before we move the needle over, I do want to ask you one more question. You'd lived in San Francisco, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So for people that may be on the fence about spending time in San Francisco, Berkeley, or perhaps living there, do you mind doing a little Venn diagram for us? Because you're an educator.
Sure. Yeah, I'm trying to think about the things that I would say they have in common.
Okay.
There is a certain eclecticism that I would say the three have in common and an appreciation for the arts. Which arts, I think, differ depending upon where you are. And of course, the demographics of each city, the cultural diversity that you find in each tends to be unique to the place itself. But you find fantastic cultural diversity, of course, in each. And I think that creativity, expression, passion for the arts, I think that that's a strong connection that the three cities have. And some connections, obviously, rich countercultural history in all three. You see that playing out in the present. And of course, that's not without complication. And these are three very expensive places to live and
Yeah.
three cities in which it's very hard to live if you're not super wealthy, right? And so I think while there is an appreciation, of course, for creativity it also is very tricky to be creative here. And I don't want to gloss over that fact, but then I think also these three cities, especially San Francisco and Oakland, I think nationally get a very unfair, bad rap. These are incredible cities. Part of the reason why the Bay Area is such an expensive place to live, right, is because everybody wants to live here.
So true. God, we could have a whole podcast just on Berkeley and San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing. And we are now going to get into the belly of the beast of this conversation. So, Ryan, I want you to imagine you are a knight, Knight, okay?
Okay.
And I used to read this book called Rules for a Knight, written by the famous actor Ethan Hawke. And this is kind of an ode to his grandfather and to his heritage, family lineage, and also something that he could pass on to his children as far as kernels of learning experiences.
Hmm.
So here we go. This is a little passage that I want you to listen to. Here it goes like this. One time, on a sweltering August night, grandfather and I made camp down by the ocean. He said, "Hey, while I teach you about the ways of war, I want you to know the real struggle is between the two wolves that live inside of each of us." "Two wolves?" I asked, seated on an old log near the fire. My eyes were transfixed by the flames twisting uncomfortably in the night air. "Yeah, one wolf is evil. It's anger, it's envy, it's greed, pity, guilt." He paused, poking the embers of our fire with a long stick he had been carving. "The other one is good. Joy, love, hope, humility, compassion, truth." I considered that for a minute, then tentatively asked, "Which wolf will win?" Sparks danced towards the stars of the old man as the old man stared into the glare of the flames and replied, "Whichever one you feed." So this short little story, if you will, packs a punch in just a page. So I want to know from you, Ryan, right now in your life, what side of the wolf are you presenting to the world more of? Is it that wolf of kindness and joy and compassion? Or is it more of the wolf that we see with jealousy and envy and greed? Or is it a little bit of both?
Hmm. It's an interesting question, and I appreciate this. Actually, my grandmother had a paraphrased version of this on her fridge when I was growing up.
No shit.
And so it's a concept that I've thought a bit about, but it's interesting that you should bring it up tonight. Yeah. I feel like probably the more attractive answer that people want to say is the one that's more positively charged. But I see them as coexisting. And I don't think I don't think it's good to run from negative emotional states or to suppress them if that's what a person authentically is feeling. I think that in many contexts, negative emotional states are actually the appropriate response, even if larger society might not necessarily think so, or even if there might be sort of this imperative to kind of present this image of happiness, regardless of how a person might be feeling. So I think that these two sides, these two wolves, they're two sides of the same coin, essentially, that they give meaning to one another as well. So one of the things that comes to mind for me about that is I love the concept of what makes a vacation so great. A vacation is great because it's temporary, because you know it's going to end, because you're in a different state of living than you normally are. And so part of what makes that so wonderful is the fact that it's so rare, it's temporary, it's going to end. We don't do it all the time. I think about that with love in general too, that what makes it so beautiful is that it's not permanent and that it's not something that is grounded in any sort of unchangeable fact, right? You have to maintain it and it is temporary just as life is. That gives it so much beauty. So I don't necessarily see things as either or in those terms, but they're both existing together. Now, I think to be more literal in response to your question, I would like to feed the positive wolf more often. I find myself, I think, unintentionally feeding the more negatively charged one. As I've gotten older, I've been thinking more about the point of things. What's the point of what I'm feeling right now? What's the point in me expressing this thing that I want to express? And I think a lot about meditation here or I guess some forms of meditation that encourage you to not become so preoccupied with voiding your mind of any sort of substance or thought, but it's rather that if a thought comes in, you accept it, you acknowledge it, and you see where it goes, you let it fade away, you follow it if you need to follow it for a little bit. I like that sort of approach to things, that I want to really acknowledge how I'm feeling and be honest about it, to not push anything away if I'm feeling it authentically.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to feed this negatively charged wolf so much that it's impacting my ability to be happy or my ability to connect how I'd like to connect with other people. Now, I think that both of those things come through very beautifully in songwriting. Some of my favorite songs, this is something that I think Morrissey does very well, where the song can be the most upbeat sounding song and the lyrics can be really miserable sounding, right? Or I think I'm thinking about Heaven Knows I'm Miserable now, very literally, but actually the lyrics in that song are people I think give them a basic read and think that they're depressed, but those lyrics are hilarious actually. But I love songs that maybe the music itself has a really chipper tone, but the lyrics have a little bit more negative valence in terms of their emotional orientation, or vice versa. It's one of my favorite things to do as a songwriter is juxtapose those things. And why I like it is because of what I was saying previously, that I don't think that those emotional states are so different. Like sometimes as we're feeling tremendously happy, we can be really disappointed about something else, or we can be really afraid that we're going to lose this feeling or whatever.
When there is a negative emotion, anger, jealousy, greed, whenever that manifests itself for you and you allow it to swim through you, and it could take 5 minutes, it could take a couple hours to pass, it might take a day. Are you telling the listeners and me, if it takes that amount of time for it to pass, you're okay with it? You're not going to just be like, oh, you know what? I can just brush that off my back. I want to sit in this. Is that what you're saying?
That is what I'm saying. And do I do it perfectly? No. Do I always do it? No. But it's something that I do more often as I've gotten older because I've made a purposeful effort to approach it like that. So when I was younger, I could be really hot-headed about a lot of things.
Okay.
And I would find myself, if I was feeling strong negative emotions, I would find myself in this really reactionary place often where I felt like I want to lash out. I want to unleash what I'm feeling in order to unburden myself from it. But that really, it's not productive. It's not fair to other people.
Mm.
And it doesn't it doesn't get you to, I think, honestly reflect on what it is that you're feeling. So one of the things I teach, and you ask such good questions. I'm trying not to bring in a million other things.
Bring them, bring them all, baby. We're all good.
But one of the things I teach is interpersonal communication, and we cover some of this kind of stuff in that class. And it's funny because I think sometimes when I tell people that I teach communication, they expect that I'll be good at it myself. And I think that there's something funny that can happen with academics, right? Where it's like, I know the theory and I can explain how it will apply to you, but me applying it to myself, that's a different story. But yeah, so I think about there's something that gets said in interpersonal communication, and this is a very oversimplified, paraphrased, but it's when you are having a conflict situation with somebody else. One really important thing to do is to remember what is the bigger picture, right? So I think when I was younger, if I got into a fight with somebody close to me, I would be really concerned with being right, with having them understand where I'm coming from and understanding the correctness of where I'm coming from.
Yes.
And I would get so fixated on that. And I wouldn't really take a step back and be like, what does that matter? And why am I bringing that energy to someone that I love?
Mm.
And and again, I'm not perfect at it, but I think now when I'm feeling hot, negative emotions, I'll do my best to take a moment and to be like, what is it exactly that I'm feeling? And I'll try to understand it before I bring that energy, before I put it back out into the world. Because I think sometimes when we notice ourselves reacting to something with surprising intensity, that should provoke within us this questioning of what am I feeling? Why am I reacting this way? And I think sometimes that can reveal some interesting, uncomfortable truths about ourselves, maybe something about our insecurities. So I think engaging at that level is really important, but also if you are having some conflict with your partner or with your best friend, with a family member, it's remember first and foremost that you love this person. Your connection is more important than anything. And that person being happy, you being happy mutually, that is the goal, not being right or feeling, some kind of justification in your reaction.
Yes. Yes, but can I play devil's advocate?
Devil's advocate, man.
I understand that might be the one of the primary goals. I get it. But couldn't one say through the interpersonal communication, the exchange of words, nonverbal cues, all of that stuff, when you're with a partner that you love and care about, isn't it also about being in the moment, being present, being authentic self?
Hmm.
And if that authentic self is an expression of rage, anger, sadness, those negative things that society goes, don't be sometimes, don't be. Isn't that what we ultimately want? Because isn't that what the person is sharing with you, their truest colors?
I think that's a great point. And of course, like anything, it depends on the personalities of those involved. But I think how I've generally accommodated for that, and I'm really glad that you brought that up because that's a crucial part of this. It's not when I'm reflecting, like I retreat into a bubble or like I go into the woods, like that's what Night Ryan might do, actually. Go on some sort of pilgrimage. But no, it's not about retreating and disconnecting, but it's about sort of like letting the person you're interacting with, letting them in on what you're thinking. Because I agree, it's important to be honest and authentic. How that looks for me is often I might say something like, "Hey, I'm feeling some anger right now." and I can't totally place it. And it's not anger at you, it's anger at this situation. I'll try to describe it as best as I can. And I think if it's appropriate, sometimes I'll be like, can we revisit this in a moment? If that's not appropriate, sometimes you have to, I think, aligned with what you were saying a little bit, sometimes you have to just wade into it as well, and you don't necessarily have the time or space to reflect on it. And maybe that's not what your partner or your loved one needs in that moment either. But I think generally de-escalating the reactive tendencies that we might have, it leads ultimately to better relating.
As an educator, teacher of interpersonal skills, the the very notion of communication exchange of words with people or nonverbal. When I went to Cal Poly and I took communication classes because that was my major,
All right.
I learned that obviously there are different aspects to interpersonal communication. There's verbal, there's nonverbal, there's written. I'm sure, what is the other one? I can't remember. Which one do you feel serves you best in terms of being a musician and collaborating with others?
Mm, that's a really interesting question, Devia. I wrote a paper about this when I was an undergraduate student, actually. I'm like, I wonder if it's on the internet somewhere. But I wrote a paper about it was about nonverbal communication mostly. And I was writing about jam sessions and how during a jam session you could find yourself entering into a flow state with complete strangers in a context where the music is so loud that you cannot use verbal communication
Mm.
or you're going to be severely impeded.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I've been able to I've been able to tell when I'm playing with new musicians, and I'm playing with some new ones for this project, Devoted Fans. I'm playing entirely with new musicians, actually, some of whom I have only met once at this point. And it's very interesting because I think sometimes you can tell pretty quickly whether you will like someone or maybe feel a little bit more neutrally about you can tell based on what the groove feels like. And this is not to say that it's such a linear a thing that like maps so straightforwardly, but I do think that I have seen patterns in it. Like if we can get along well musically without a ton of advanced preparation, chances are that we'll get along well in other senses too. So that to me about being a musician is fascinating. That sort of nonverbal element of connection between people who might actually be strangers for the most part.
I want to read another passage to you from this book, Rules for a Night. This is all about humility. Without the blacksmith, the knight's sword would splinter into shards. Without the carpenter, a lady's wagon would collapse. Without the mason, the castle would crumble. Without the seamstress, the king would ride to a church naked as a fool. All living things rely on each other. If there were no earthworms, the soil would be depleted, grow no food, and we would die. Understanding that he relies on all that surrounds him, a knight is kind above all. He knows he will need many friends. Proper manners are not trivial. Being polite is part of our daily meditation on the equality of mankind. One of the things I've always appreciated about you is that you have this air about you that suggests to me and to people that you are not better than the next person. There is great humility in the way that you carry yourself in the world. So I want to know, Ryan, where does that humility come from?
I appreciate that feedback because that's actually something that I'm not always sure about. I think that it can sometimes be difficult to be the primary songwriter for a band and to to be kind of more, how do I want to put it? To be richly collaborative with people. I think sometimes that can be a little bit challenging, but it is something that I strive for, and I think also that I'm improving with. But in terms of humility more generally, I think I said something earlier about competition.
Hmm.
I've never been tremendously competitive. I have moments. I
Sure.
have moments, and those of some other people you've interviewed in the local music scene. I've played tennis with them, and they've seen.
I
I like.
know who you're alluding to.
I feel like there's a whole series of local musicians. Like, if only people knew, like the tennis networking going on. But yes, I distracted myself with this tennis.
Humility.
Yes, humility. Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think this connects really well to music scenes. And I appreciate that you came to the show I put on, the Jesus and Mary Chain tribute show a couple months ago, because part of what I want to do, and I put it on the back burner as I've gone through some life changes, but part of what I want to do is I want to build structures to mutually uplift other creatives, other musicians, other groups. And I think that's part of my approach, that I don't see somebody else's success in my world as contributing negatively to my own circumstances. Like, I want the water to lift up every boat, essentially. And any success that my friends have experienced with their groups, I celebrate it. I'm happy for them. I don't feel like it's a zero-sum game, like, oh, this other band becomes more popular, like, therefore we lose out as a result. In fact, I think right now there's a boom in the Bay Area in terms of its music scene, under-acknowledged. Like, you're acknowledging it, you're interviewing so many of the people directly involved in this, but it's like there's so much good stuff coming out of the Bay Area right now. And it would be weird to be like, well, I wish my band was on the level of this other band. It's like, no, good for them. And like maybe we can get stuff going together. Like, maybe we can kind of be a part of this more mutually. Like, maybe we can bring each other. Maybe if there is a group that has some kind of connection, they can like offer that connection to another group. So that's something that I've tried to do, is always introduce people in my world to the people I know who can make things happen. I think sometimes with competition, people sort of hold on to their connections like that and guard them a little bit, but it's like, no, like, let's make everything easier for everybody.
But with that viewpoint and that perspective, I mean, you're a very bright, intelligent person. But don't you think that was also passed down to you in some manner? I mean, I feel like mom and or dad exhibited these behaviors that you saw. Okay, there's humility here. Now, maybe you couldn't articulate that at a young age, but upon reflection, you could appreciate that approach to life. So,
Yes.
did you see that whilst growing up?
Oh yeah. I mean, there were plenty of people are very humble and are very talented, or are a certain way, and you might not know it until you really get to know them. Plenty of people like that. And one of the best examples of that is my dad. He is someone who is incredibly a brilliant person, super talented in so many different areas, incredible mechanic. He can build anything. I mean, like, mechanic in multiple senses. He can repair your engine, he can build you a house. Brilliant, brilliant man, and also incredible athlete, but very talented, very ethical person, and very understated in a lot of ways. I think that the magnitude of how talented he is, you don't necessarily know until you get to know him, and then it's like mind blowing. And it's not just him like that, but he was a strong influence on me. And one of the things that he influenced me with, which maybe contributes to this, is he always encouraged me to be a good person for its own sake, not because I thought that anything would come out of it, like anything material would come out of it for me. He never connected it to religion either. So his thing was always like, be a good person because it's the right thing to do.
Mm.
Be a good person because that's the only way. And I think similarly, in terms of me getting into music, and to a certain extent, my career in academia, both of my parents have always instilled in me this dynamic of dive into something and have fun with it. And I think how I'm connecting that to your question is like when I was learning guitar, I never was interested in like, let me learn these Hendrix solos or like, let me learn how to play these really intricate parts that will impress people. I was more interested in like, oh, this sounds good to my ears. This seems this seems fun to play and it sounds cool. And that's that. So I think how that comes out in my music is a lot of my music is very straightforward, very minimal, not the most technically, it's not very advanced, right? You don't have to be the world's greatest instrumentalist to be able to play my songs, but that's not the point. No, the songs are good, the songs are catchy, the songs are fun, and they flow naturally and I have a good time doing it.
So you just told me the wonderful characteristics, the traits that you acquired from your father. So what about your mother?
Oh my goodness. I think from her, everything I feel comes from her. My my curiosity comes from her. She also dives deep into things, and I think I've gotten a lot of that from her. And she's a voracious reader, very, very smart. And I think the powers of my parents combined really have had a profound influence on me. And they both are they're aligned in a lot of ways. But my mom, very, very sensitive, very thoughtful, very loving person. And I think a lot of her energy influences how I think about the world and how I think about relationships and other people and what I observe. And then a lot of that gets written into, I would say, the lyrics and maybe some of the feeling of the music.
Is there a particular song or two through this current project or Lavender Blush that really possesses that kind of parental spirit that you've channeled?
Oh, I'm gonna try not to get too emotional, but there's a song. It's I think the most different song on the record. It's called "Advice from an Old Japanese Maple to a Young Japanese Maple." It's also like all the other songs have like two-word titles. Yeah, but that song, I it's about my grandfather, and
Oh,
he passed away last summer, and I think he's a big part of where my father got a lot of his energy from. But I think it's beautiful the ways in which our family will live on, how they live on through us.
yeah.
And that's sort of the feeling of that song. I recorded that song. I was wearing a flannel shirt of my grandfather's that I've taken, and it's sort of become mine. And I think of him every time I wear it. But I was wearing it when I recorded the vocals for that song, and generally right, like advice from a. And I tried to make the lyrics, they're very literally about tree advice. I mean, they they are, but then obviously it's about advice from an older person, or someone with maybe some more experience and some more wisdom to someone just starting out.
Grow softly, let my Celia teach you omnipresence. Wind whispers and carries accumulated wisdom of the forest. The scars on your bark are your poems of resilience. Storms will bend you. You'll always return to your familiar shape. Never forget your heart would. Never forget who you are.
And that is perfect because that ties directly into this book, the wisdom being passed down. And as we take in that wisdom and push it out to the world, we are essentially taking part of our heritage and expressing that. And that is going to move into this next part of the book. And this is called pride. Never pretend you are not a knight or attempt to diminish yourself because you deem it will make others more comfortable. We show others the most respect by offering the best of ourselves. Arrogance is born of insecurity. Pride is different. It is born of dignity, self-worth, and self-respect. So from one educator to another educator, this is kind of a twofold question here. How do you take pride in the work that you do as an educator? That's one. And how do you take pride in the work that you do as an artist and musician?
What a question. I was thinking initially about, I hadn't experienced today with a student. This is my final class session at one of the institutions where I teach. And I had a student who was essentially asking me questions for how to, asking me questions about how to be more confident, how to be more assertive, how to develop and maintain stronger boundaries with other people. And the student was asking me the question as both a communication professor, but then also as the way the student put it was as an adult, which I thought was pretty funny. But as an older person, and it's been interesting to kind of to shift into that realm, because for so long I thought of myself in this imposter kind of way as an educator of like, who am I? I'm just this young person too, and sure, maybe I'm more acquainted with theory than my students are, but in terms of having rich life knowledge, I'm not so sure about that. And it's been interesting to see students kind of calling on that from me more. And it gives me interesting insight into how they perceive me, but then also it makes me think about what it felt like when I was that age. And I remember going to some of my professors' office hours just to be like, what do I do in life? What have you done? How can I follow a path that's, kind of similar to the one you followed perhaps? And I remember feeling like I turned to some professors as like just to be a source of stability.
Okay.
And when this student was talking to me today, and I've had this moment with plenty of students over the course of my career where sometimes it's shocking to me how to put this. This student I perceive, and generally students like this, I perceive as being very capable, very self-assured, but sometimes they will reveal that they feel anything but. And I often feel quite surprised by that. And I almost want to be like, but you're amazing. You do great work. You're an interesting person. Like how could you not see that? And how could you not, just lean into that completely? But it's like, well, that's part of being young, I think, is that or just, not even just being young. It's being young in some ways, but also being a human in some ways, where it's like you're amazing. Accept that, own up to that, right? And I think part of what I try to do as an educator is to like help students design the key to unlock themselves.
Ah.
And it's not like I am creating this thing, right? But it's like I'm helping them. We're doing it together, but they are ultimately doing it for themselves.
Yes.
And I think as a professor of public speaking, argumentation, debate, courses that are more applied like that, it's really fantastic because I get to see a lot of the time students who are terrified of public speaking. And then by the end of the semester, they're knocking this incredibly powerful, persuasive speech just out of the park. And then I think, okay, now that you know you can do that, what is that going to show you about yourself and other avenues as well? And so I think that's a wonderful thing to see, and that's one of the main things that I'm in it for in terms of my career. In terms of music, I'm getting more and more into the realm of like I'm just going to do this thing because it's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Devoted fans, this new project, I'm glad you listened to it. I think a handful of people have so far. If this is something that never gets a huge audience, whatever. I want people to listen to it, of course, but it's not going to be, it's a good record. I'm proud of it. And the attention it gets to me is independent of how proud I am of it. And that is not something that would have been true for me over the course of being a musician. When I was younger, I was very much like, it's been this number of years. Why don't we have a record deal yet? It's been this number of years. Why are we only getting this number of monthly listeners, or we only have this attendance at our shows? Now it's like good stuff gets recognized as good eventually.
Yes.
So there's that element, but then there's also like the who cares about the recognition? Like I think it's good. I had fun making it. I'm proud of it.
Damn you. And I say that with a huge smile because I don't know if I want to go left or right with this conversation or a little bit of both. Because I imagine as an educator, a wonderful educator that you are, and obviously I've never been step inside your classroom to see the magic unfold, but the pride that you take within the work that you do as an educator, I'm almost certain those students are sponging that up. And I'm almost certain that you are creating an atmosphere, an environment for them to, one, step outside their comfort zones a little bit. And if they don't, you're going to guide them along, be their compass, if you will. And then it's going to rear itself somehow, some way. And I think that is the essence of a great teacher. And I feel as though you can take pride in that, right?
I'd say so.
Thank you. And I say thank you because when I've asked artists, musicians, photographers, painters, DJs, whatever it is, they have a hard time articulating, scratch that. They have a hard time celebrating and acknowledging the good work that they do because they think it's too boastful. It becomes not pride, but hubris.
Mm.
And relation, connecting to your music and this devoted fans' work. Whilst creating this album, was there a song that you just sat back and you're like, fuck, this is good?
Oh, yeah.
I have a feeling you're going to say Become a Flower.
Oh, that's interesting. Become a Flower was one of the quicker, later, but I had fun. I had fun with that one. I sometimes am like, I spend too much time in the lower BPM range with my slower, moody songs. Like, let me kick it up a notch. And so that was maybe I need to kick it up a notch and have a couple faster songs in there. I think one of the first songs, there's a couple, but one of them was You're My. I would say that was the first one where I was like, whoa, I might be onto something a little bit different. And then also Your Taste, I have a soft spot for as well. And then Vanessa, I Love You,
Mhm.
that too. And that, of course, is about my fiance, and she's incredible, very, very easy to write songs about. But I think sometimes songs just kind of like, it almost seems like they spill out of me. And those three absolutely were like, I think I just wrote them entirely, probably in a couple of minutes. For Vanessa, I Love You, I remember I was walking around my parents' yard with my acoustic guitar, just walking around the yard, playing this basic 1, 3, 4, 5 chord progression and like humming a possible melody. And I'm like, I want to write a love song that's just like, it's obviously a love song. Every line ends with the word you, like no concern for rhyming. But I think the one song is probably You're My, and it's a little different than the other songs too in some ways, a little more electronic, a little dancier.
Mm-hmm.
But it was one where after I wrote it, and I take a little bit more risks with my singing, I think, or I'm in a little bit of a slightly different range. After I listened back to that one, I was like, huh, that's cool.
Oh, Vanessa, baby, darling, I'm in love with you. Why overcomplicate the sentiment? Baby, my heart. The planets have aligned. I think about you all the time. Exploding butterflies. When I gaze into your
You strike me as a courageous person, willing to kind of push the envelope a little bit, step out of the comfort zone. From this book, he writes, anything that gives light must endure burning. Courage is our ability and willingness to overcome our fear. Fear is nothing to be ashamed of. It is a powerful resource, reminding us to be wary, alert, and mindful. Fear is the dark and courage is the light. Fear is the call and courage is the answer. So, Ryan, Mr. Knight, for this particular album, how did you kind of step out of your comfort zone? How did you demonstrate courage to yourself that maybe didn't appear with Lavender Blush work or any other previous music?
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking really quickly. There's a lyric on for from elsewhere that is fear and anxiety become curiosity.
Huh.
And I'm thinking about what you just said about fear in relation to courage. It's really scary to release your own original art. I think everybody knows that to a certain extent, even people who don't identify as artists, but it's really, really scary. And it's interesting because like even after making this LP public, like, you know, you hear the positives, but then you also hear like the constructive feedback and sometimes the unnecessary comments. And part of that is like, well, you know, that's and same with teaching. It's like, yeah, there are students who really like my classes, but then there are also students who like they don't like me the second I open my mouth. And that's how it is the whole semester. And it's like, you know, as is the case in life, it's like it takes courage and it's risky to put something that you have created and that reflects your soul in some ways
Yeah.
out into the world. It's very vulnerable. And I think that there are shades of vulnerability to it as well. So, for devoted fans, to give some context, these were songs that I was originally writing as Lavender Blush demos. But I think, as is the case, so Lavender Blush these days is like, it's completely collaborative. And I'm still writing, I would say, like the majority of the structures, and I'm writing the lyrics, but we're writing the songs now together, and we have been for a while. But I feel I love making music. I'm drawn to it like a moth to a flame. I am going to, for the rest of my life,
Yeah.
be recording little snippets every day, every other day, as often as possible. It's just what I do. It's how I unwind. And so this started as Lavender Blush demos, but then I think when you're working with other musicians, you also want to be sure that like you're not bringing too much of your own individual nonsenses. I'll put it that way. Because yes, I'm a lovely character, but I can be a bit much, and I think some of the things that people who don't know me super well might find charming. People who know me really well, those same things might grate on them a little bit. I'm aware of this, and so I think with the full band context, I don't always bring them my like most vulnerable, out there kind of songwriting because it's like this is a shared emotional space. That's kind of my logic. And then I think Lavender Blush, there's some kind of expectations. Whether these expectations are real or not, I'm not sure, but I feel like there's kind of an expectation at this point about what the sound should be like. And I also wanted to sort of separate myself from those constraints. So for devoted fans, I felt like, well, once I decided that they wouldn't be Lavender Blush demos, but they'd be for this, at the time, what was a solo project of mine, then I was like, I can do whatever I want, and I don't have to run my ideas by anybody, or I don't have to be worried about what people might think about what I'm doing. I can just do whatever I want, how I want to do it. And that I'm referencing all of my family members except for my grandmother, who I will reference now. She is a watercolor painter. She's an artist. She specializes in watercolor, and she has this method where she starts her paintings by essentially like putting saran wrap onto a canvas and like dabbing watercolor all over it and like letting the patterns that emerge dictate the forms of what she eventually will paint. Beautiful. When she told me about her process, it influenced me tremendously. And so I did kind of like the music version of that for this. Her the cover art is her one of her paintings.
Okay.
Yeah, and so anyway, I was treating devoted fans almost like as if I were journaling for therapy, where I would 5 minutes, 10 minutes every single day, I'd record a little something, or I'd like play something and not record it. And I added things little by little. And I really tried not to limit myself. If I wanted to do it, I would just do it and I'd listen to it later. And if I still liked it later, then I would keep it. If I didn't, I would revise it. And I think to go back to your question about fear and courage is I'm a pretty personal writer. In Lavender Blush too. Usually my lyrics are about something I've experienced or something that I've observed. And like maybe I'll write about that concept, but with like other characters or more obliquely. With devoted fans, it's a little bit more like, hey, I want to put this out there. And like some of it is super emotionally vulnerable stuff like Japanese Maple, which is about my grandfather and his passing and our relationship. And so there are some moments on the record that are like that are, I think, pretty personal. And it feels a little bit like when you put something personal out into the world and somebody's like, ah, this is terrible. Ah, the kick drum's not mixed loud enough, like this record that you spent all this time. Like, oh, these lyrics are terrible. It's a little bit like, oh, ouch.
Yeah.
But then it's also like, these are the risks that you take. These are the risks that you take as just a living person. Like, you don't even have to be a creative person. It is vulnerable. It takes guts to put yourself out there. So it's very scary for people, myself included, to do that. But I think it's really important because to me, right now, it feels like there is a real lack of people authentically putting themselves out there in a way that is truly vulnerable. Even vulnerability sometimes seems to be coming from a place of like, it's cool vulnerability.
Mm.
And to be actually vulnerable is extremely scary. And I don't know, like on this record, there is a love song that is about my baby, very literally. And it's like, oh, is this a love song? What could this song be about? It's pretty clear. And so I think like there are risks to things like that too, when you're like just being direct about here are some things I've literally felt. Here you go, world.
Yeah. And I know this is going to work out in terms of this relationship. But if it doesn't, there's a song sitting there on Bandcamp and Spotify that's never going away.
But that's part of life.
Okay.
And it's like love is just such an incredible example of romantic love. It's like, what are all the things that happens in a person's life that gets them to their person?
Yeah.
And sometimes a lot of complicated stuff. And it's like, let's not pretend that that stuff doesn't exist.
Sure.
It's all part of the story.
Do you mind if I ask you a couple more questions?
Sure.
Okay. I want to respect your time. So you had mentioned, as I wrote down here, we were just talking about courage and putting yourself out there and vulnerability. I'm going to share something with you that most listeners don't know, and I'm not doing this to be braggadocious. I'm only doing it in the context of this conversation. And then I'm going to ask you a question. You are right. As an artist, putting yourself there, I mean, you are somewhat naked to the world. That approach was the same sentimentality, the same vibe I imbued in my classroom, which derived from a gentleman you may know, Robin Williams. And I'm not talking so much the cocaine fueled manic Robin Williams. There are elements to that.
Hmm.
Ever since Dead Poets Society, and and this is a spoiler for people who've never seen it, but the final scene still lives and breathes in me every day. And that scene stayed with me, and I tried to present that as an educator, because knowing to take on that risk in front of fourth and fifth graders, being that vulnerable was going to pay off in dividends. And I knew that, because even though a fourth and fifth grader can't say, Mr. Frederick, you're being vulnerable, I wanted to role model the shit out of that.
Totally.
So here's my question. Tell me, because I'm a lover of education and educators stepping out of their comfort zone. You talked about this regarding the album. How do you do it as as an educator? How do you show vulnerability to those students?
Well, I liked your example because I think we underestimate children, that's for sure, and
Yeah.
what children can pick up on. And I agree with you. I imagine that they weren't like what you're showing right now is vulnerability, but I imagine that they could feel the energy of what you were showing. And I think that this is a question for educators generally is like, how much vulnerability do you show? What kind of vulnerability do you show? When do you show it? For what reasons do you show it? There's a lot to be said. I mean, these are all, I think, individually deeply philosophical questions because, like, and something that I've thought a lot about as an educator is there are distinctions. My students and I, we're not friends. We can be friendly. I am their professor still, though, and there is a power differential, and that power differential it needs to be respected, and I need to construct it enough so that it's respected. And that's the reality of it. Then but at the same time, like I care deeply, and I think you could probably catch on to this which is maybe why you said what you said earlier, but I care deeply about my students and about their well-being, and I actually care about it. Even the students who I find a little bit frustrating, I care about all of my students' well-being. I want them to live good and happy lives. And so like I think starting from that position is crucial. But I had an experience a couple years ago where I was talking about a concept that I want to prevent myself from like explaining this entire concept right now. This is like the professor and me coming out where I'm like, here's the concept, here's what it means. But I was explaining this concept that definitely applies to my life. And I was explaining the concept in a more abstract way. It applies to many people's lives. And I had a student ask me, like, Professor, how would you say you've experienced that concept? And it was a question that sort of put me on the spot.
Yeah.
And like the class got very quiet. And I stammered. I felt nervous. And I'm always like, how much do I want to reveal to my students about my life? And so I gave some very non-committal answer of like, well, yeah, that concept has affected me in a variety of ways, like blah, blah, blah. And I could feel it was like I sucked all the air out of the room. It was like, and they looked at me like, come on.
Yeah.
And I paused And I'm like, no, that was a really good question. And I answered you badly because I'm not used to being asked direct questions like that. Here's my real response. And when I responded with more depth, the students were like literally like leaning in. And it was interesting. It just felt very different. And it felt like the student who was asking me that question was kind of calling upon me to be more of a human being.
Yes.
And I didn't answer that call initially, but then when I did, it also showed to that student that I knew that I didn't, or it showed not just to that student, but to all the students. And that I also wanted to rectify that, which I think that that is important. And so, I think that also sometimes there are teachers who mistake like sharing everything with their students as vulnerability. No, but I do want my students to see in me that I am not always confident, even if they might assume that I am. I'm a public speaking professor, but I still get really nervous to give speeches. I don't have all my stuff figured out, right? And I think those moments where we get to connect like that, and then also to be like, yeah, you're a student, I'm a professor, but like we're both human beings navigating a lot of uncertainty in the world. I think that those moments can be really, really powerful.
On December 14th, 2012, a day that forever changed me as an educator, a day that, well, the following day, I vowed that regardless of the student I was walking through my door and leaving my door every day at 3 o'clock, I was going to connect with them in some manner. Of course, I'm talking about the mass shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School. The most profound experience I've ever read about, learned about, as it moved me in such a manner I still don't even know how to really articulate it to this day. I do honor it every year on that date with a write-up on my Facebook page. But I need to ask you this, Ryan. How did that day impact you as a professor, as an educator? And if that specific incident didn't, is there a specific incident that changed you in the role that you play as a professor?
Well, I think it's despair inducing
Mm-hmm.
to realize that children being murdered en masse will lead to no gun reform legislation in this country. It's beyond logic. I mean, I don't really know what to say about that beyond that. In terms of like that is such a stark and literal example of violence in US culture. But US culture is violent in many respects too, symbolically as well. And I think that part of the symbolic violence of that specific moment was to show people what US politicians are unwilling to do and how entrenched they are in the interest of the gun lobby and all of that to not do anything for substantive change. That sends that symbolic message too of like your politicians don't care about you. They don't care about whether you live or die. They don't care about children being murdered. They're going to do nothing different. The message is that those things send, and we're getting messages like that all the time. Literally that, similar to that. There's so much in US culture that is just soul destroying. And I think that, and I don't want to be overly simplistic with this either, or like equate. I don't intend to be doing any of that. because like their different forms of violence are also not even and are not they don't have the same level of intensity, right? But I think that there is a pervasive thread of like we don't care about you in US culture. And when these horrible things happen, we will work to make them worse. We will work to make sure they happen again, rather than we will do everything we can to make sure that this horrific thing that never should have happened will never happen again. And so I think then, unfortunately, one of the things that happens is that it becomes our responsibility in some ways. And I wish that our society did a better job of making institutional and larger structural changes. I think too much is placed upon us individually. When, like, yes, individual effort is important, but like these larger efforts are important too, maybe even more important, and they all work together, right? But anytime I can counteract that with my students, any degree of like, if you're feeling unsafe, if you're feeling unloved, if you are feeling like nobody cares about you, if you are feeling like nobody's interested in you, if nobody's curious about you or what you have to say, I would like to be that person in that moment for that student. And it's not just in my teaching. I'm like that in general, where like we all have something to offer, and it's important to acknowledge that. It's important to acknowledge that in others. And like maybe somebody doesn't have an outlet
Mhm.
for certain thoughts or feelings. If I can be that outlet, if we can be that outlet for somebody, it might seem minor, but it's really not. It has a huge impact. And I think like your effort to show your students that they matter to you individually, like that pales in comparison, yes, to what our government should have done immediately. But it's a huge thing that you did, and it's a huge thing that you're doing to show people like in the face of this vast system that is telling you that you're unimportant, that you're insignificant, that like you don't matter in the cosmic scheme of things. I am telling you right now that yes, you do. It's necessary. It's beautiful.
Before we wrap up this interview, and I know we just talked about a very heavy subject, an important one. When tragedy happened, I went to the classroom that morning. It was a Sunday morning. And I lied there on the floor, bawling my eyes out.
Mm.
Obviously, there were no students. There wasn't even a janitor on the campus. There might have been one, two other teachers. It was a cold December day. And I was staring up at the flickering lights. I was, my classroom, I had this flickering light, drove me crazy. And I just asked that question, why? Why, over and over again. And I remember when the students came back to school on Monday, because they were so young, a lot of the parents had shielded and blocked any information that was coming their way and presenting it to their kids. But I knew it was just going to take one kid to be like, hey, did you guys hear? Did you hear what happened? And it opened up conversation amongst teachers. And I will ask you this for our final educator kind of question. How do you know that you've made an impact, a difference in the student's life?
Well, I'm
And
gonna.
I'm not just talking about test scores. You're so
Oh,
beyond
sure,
that. Yeah.
sure. Yeah, student learning outcome assessment. Well, I look at the statistics, W. Let me tell you. No,
Real estate value. I know who you are.
no, it's kind of going to align with and I love these conversations because I think that there are life themes that come through in creativity. That it's like this logic applies. It applies everywhere, and we're touching on something that I think is foundational to existence. But it sort of, in a way, doesn't matter. And I know that I'm having an impact because I take the same kind of approach that you took as an educator, that like my students from I'm approaching interacting with them in this very individualized way that is authentic, right? I care about them actually. I want them to succeed. And so if even one thing that I've taught them, if they take away just one element of the class, like great. Maybe I'll never know about it either.
Hmm.
That's cool. It's like the new record, right? I know it's a good record. Maybe nobody will ever listen to it, but I know it's a good record and I'm proud of it. I know my teaching is good. I'm proud of my teaching. Maybe I'll never hear any literal commentary. Now, I do occasionally hear some comments, which it's very wonderful, and it affirms the fact. I'll hear from students like years after, like this thing that you talked about in class, I'm using it. I've been using it. That's really sweet, but it's also like I know that's the case, and I also know that students who like have forgotten my name, forgotten my face, they still have built some skills within themselves as a result of taking classes with me that they are using every single day.
You do realize that you are teaching a skill, and I'm talking about public speaking. You're teaching and helping students overcome the number one fear that Americans have.
Yeah.
That's more than flying. That's more than spiders. That's more than illnesses. The
So
number
people,
one fear is public speaking.
yeah, like they rate it more than death. I think Seinfeld had an anecdote about that. Just like that's so interesting to me. But it's like, yeah, I think you'd probably most people think they're more likely to give a speech sometime soon than to die, right? Of course, we never know. Part of the mystery of life.
What's coming down the line for you, my friend, in 2025? Anything else you want to share regarding music? Are you doing any shows?
Well, there's something that is in the works for September. I hope it ends up working out. But basically, Devoted Fans started out as a just me thing, but I'm like we got to make this happen. These songs are fun. Like we got to bring these to an audience. So I've assembled a group so far. It's currently a four piece, including me. And we've got, have you met Jim Rivas from Rocket Ship?
No.
Awesome drummer. He's someone I've known for a very long time. He was in the 90s Slumberland group Rocket Ship. Incredible group, very influential group for me. And like this drummer from this group that I love is playing drums in my group now. It's very exciting for me, but I love Jim. He's a really good guy. And we've known each other for a long time. Our bands have played together, but we've never made music together. So he's drumming. And then we've got the two folks that I met through Craigslist in 2025. Craigslist is still making it happen for musicians. And really, two really awesome people, a bassist and a lead guitarist. We've only practiced all together once, but as I was saying earlier, like our first practice, I'd never met these two guys before, but our first practice was phenomenal. The energy was immediately there, and it's like, dang, okay.
Nice.
Okay, so I think we could see probably some Devoted Fan shows in the second half of the year. And then Lavender Blush, working on an LP as well. My focus was on Devoted Fans for a bit, but it's going to go back to Lavender Blush in terms of recording.
Okay.
And that I'm sure we'll have a show or two coming up, and hopefully the LP there will come out next year. But like all this stuff that I'm working on now, I'm very proud of, and I've had fun making.
Any movies, books, podcasts, TV series, albums you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
I've been listening to, yeah, I have it right over here. There's a group called Rat Columns. Pacific Kiss is the name of the record. I've been playing that pretty consistently for a couple years. John Conley, frequent podcast guest, he recommended that to me initially. Great album. I'd recommend that. And then the Flash Hits are coming out with a new record. Flash Hits, I believe they're based in Philadelphia now. Psychedelic group, the main songwriter, Damian Taylor. He used to have a band called the Sounds of Kaleidoscope that had some members of, I believe, the Ropers, Lilies, Brian Jonestown Massacre. But I used to play a lot when I was in Moonbeams. I played a lot with Damien's brother's band called the Tennis System. And Damien was in the Tennis System for a while too, it's so cool, like brothers playing in a band together. But anyway, Damien's current band, the Flash Hits, cool group, very, very unique sounding. And I've been listening to them a bunch lately too. In terms of books, I just read Parable of the Sower, which I don't know why it took me so long to read that. Incredibly prescient book, like frighteningly relevant to read at this current political moment. It's like I imagine what it would feel like to reread 1984, but probably like worse. But it's like, yeah, the seeds of some of the strangeness and authoritarian streaks that we're seeing currently in the US government. People have been calling out that pattern being in progress for decades, and it's frightening that it's been on that track for so long and to see it coming to fruition as it is. But yeah, phenomenal book. And films, I need you to recommend me some films. I feel like I saw The Godfather and like Scarface for the first time like last year. And people are telling like, what are you doing? These are all-time films, and like these are films that people are quoting every single day. Like, yeah, I don't know.
Okay. I'm going to throw one your way.
Okay.
Obviously, it's not perfect. It's a TV series I watched with my girlfriend. She had turned me on to it. It's called Dying for Sex
Oh, I've heard of this one.
with Michelle Williams.
Love Michelle Williams.
And obviously, I'm not here to reveal all the details, but I will say, and maybe this is for another podcast conversation with you, it is one of the most original TV series that explores death in the face of grimness, of course, but in comedy. And shit, I don't know how to say this without giving away. This idea that we are here for such a fleeting amount of time, that's nothing new. I know that.
Yeah.
But the way that it presents itself and unspools itself in the relationship that she has with people around her and merging sex with it, it's a phenomenal concept. And you have to see it to be like, okay, I think I know what William's talking about now. Because I'm trying not to reveal anything really. So it's called Dying for Cancer, and it connected me immediately to my father. And those moments of what would I do in that situation. So I'm going to recommend that one. And I think it's on Hulu.
Okay.
Yeah. And I don't often actually recommend on my podcast shows, but I just felt right.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're absolutely welcome. Before I get the final word with the last quote, do you have anything else you want to share?
Well, I just wanted to say that I appreciate you and I appreciate the work that you're doing. I think that what I was talking about earlier, you do such a good thing to give artists a platform, artists who deserve more recognition and maybe aren't quite getting it yet. I love what you do for us, and it's a fantastic thing. It's part of, I think, the communal orientation that I'm trying to work toward as well. So I appreciate you. Thank you.
There's the gratitude. I appreciate. Thank you for those really kind words. And it's been a hell of a ride and a journey, and one I owe a great deal of gratitude towards my girlfriend, who has been so supportive of this, and obviously you, and amongst others. And I have tried to take what I've learned from the classroom and apply it to this specific field now. Vastly different, but very similar. So I'm appreciative of these conversations as I'm learning so much about people's own personal lives and how it really fuels that artistic inspiration, whether it be suicide, cancer, the loss of a pet, whatever it may be. All fascinating. And where can people check out your work?
Well, we have a Bandcamp page, devotedfans.bandcamp.com. Then we're on the streaming services as well. Soon to be playing out locally.
I think it's only fitting I'm going to finish with this last bit from the book, Rules for a Night. Again, a great read to the classroom students, friends, relatives, cousins, little kids, all of that. Written by Ethan Hawke. This is love. Love is the end goal. It is the music of our lives. There is no obstacle enough love cannot move. The magnificent knights and ladies of this world have been great leaders and warriors, but also healers. They fight with love, lead with love, and heal with love. My name is W, host of the High Art on the Edge page, host of this podcast feature known as Surprise Cast. Ryan Lescure, thank you so much for being part of this and for coming back to Desserts for the 4th time.
Thank you for having me.
You're quite welcome. And remember this, everyone. Actually, I want you to remember a couple things. Great communication amongst friends is always there. You just have to listen to each other. And the second thing I'm going to recommend, great music is all around us. You just have to keep your ears open. Ciao.